ሰላም ጤና ይስጥልኝ እንዴት ናችሁ? Good afternoon, good morning, good evening. Thank you for joining us from around the world. Greetings everyone. And now here we are on the second session of the 4-part symposium on Ethiopian media for peace. Today we will be talking about media role in confronting hate speech, disinformation, and peace building. It's an exciting moment for all of us to be here together because this is a very important topic that we need to discuss. This symposium on Ethiopian media for peace is brought to you by Peace and Development Center International, PDCI, and Ethiopian Media Council, EMC. The virtual event organizer is Flawless Events, and I'm your moderator, Meti Shwaye Yilma, founder of Queendom Media. Before we go on, let me introduce you to our two sponsors. The first one is the Peace and Development Center International, PDCI. It's an independent, non-partisan, not-for-profit, and non-governmental organization established in the United States of America by senior international professionals of Ethiopian origin who are committed to promoting peace in Ethiopia. PDCI is committed to promoting and fostering a culture of peace, reconciliation, and nonviolence, preventing and resolving conflicts for peaceful coexistence, and advancing socio-economic development to build a just, equitable, and peaceful Ethiopia. PDCI is a neutral arbiter and convener. It doesn't take sides. PDCI partners collaborates and supports PDC Ethiopia in furthering peace among the Ethiopian society throughout the world. PDCI cooperates with all peace lovers to promote economic development and abolish poverty, disease, and illiteracy in Ethiopia. And the second sponsor is the Ethiopian Media Council, EMC. It's an independent civil society organization registered under the proclamation that governs CSOs in Ethiopia. The council was formed following the General Assembly held in January 2016 at the Assembly Hall of the UN Economic Commission for Africa. The council's members include publishers, broadcasters, as well as media associations. Currently, it has about 50 members. EMC aims to promote press freedom and build journalists' capacity. EMC has an executive committee in which Ato Amara Aragawi, the general manager of the Reporter English and Reporter Amharic newspapers, serves as chairperson, and Wezaro Ma'aza Birru, the co-owner of Shagar FM, serves as deputy chairperson. Last week, there was a misunderstanding when we introduced one of our speakers from the Ministry of Peace. Ethiopian Media Council is an independent, self-governing entity, and no governmental body is on its board, including the Ministry of Peace. We err when we say that, when we introduce, and we apologize for the error, and I would like to stress again, the Ethiopian Media Council is an independent, self-governing council. እንዴት ዋላችሁ እንዴት አደራችሁ እንዴት አመሻችሁ በመላው ዓለም የምትከታተሉን በሙሉ ዛሬ እዚህ ስለተገናኘንና የኢትዮጵያ ሚዲያ ለሰላም በሚል በአራት ክፍል ለተዘጋጀው ሲምፖዚየም የሁለተኛ ክፍል ስለመጣችሁ በጣም እናመሰግናለን። እንግዲህ ትንሽ ማስተዋወቅ ላድርግ በአማርኛ የዛሬው ፕሮግራማችን ሁለተኛው ክፍል የሲምፖዚየሙ ማለት ነው የሚዲያ የጥላቻ ንግግርን የሐሰት መረጃንና የሰላም ግንባታ ላይ በተመለከተ የሚዲያ ሚና ምንድነው በሚል ርዕስ ነው ዛሬ የምንወያየው። ይሄንን ሲምፖዚየም ወደናንተ ያቀርቡላችሁ የኢትዮጵያ ሰላምና ልማት ማዕከል እንዲሁም ደግሞ ወይንም PDCI የምንለው እንዲሁም ደግሞ የኢትዮጵያ ሚዲያ ካውንስል ነው። ኢቨንቱን ያዘጋጀላችሁ ይሄንን ቨርቹዋል ኢቨንት ፍሎለስ ኢቨንትስ ነው። እኔ ደግሞ ሞዴሬት ማደርገው ወይም ያስተዋወኩኝ በአራቱም ፕሮግራሞች መቆየው መቲ ሸዋዬ ይልማንኝ የኩዊንደም ሚዲያ መስራች። ስለዚህ ሲምፖዚየም እና ወደ እናንተ ስላመጡላችሁ ድርጅቶች ትንሽ ልበላችሁና ከዛ በኋላ ወደ ፕሮግራሙ እንመለሳለን። የመጀመሪያው ስፖንሰራችን የኢትዮጵያ ሰላም ልማት ማዕከል ነው። የኢትዮጵያ ሰላም ልማት ማዕከል ወይንም PDCI መንግስታዊ ያልሆነ ከማንም ያልወገነ ለትርፍ ያልቆመ ድርጅት ሲሆን ሰላምን በማስፈን እንዲሁም ደግሞ የተለያዩ ግጭቶች እንዲፈቱ የራሱን የሆነ አስተዋጽኦ በማድረግ ላይ የሚገኝ ለልማት እንዲሁም ደግሞ ድህነትን ለመቅረፍ በጣም ታትሮ የሚሰራ ድርጅት ነው። የተቋቋመው በአሜሪካ ሀገር ሲሆን በተለያዩ የአሜሪካ፣ የአውሮፓ፣ የአውስትራሊያ አገሮች ውስጥ የሚኖሩ ኢትዮጵያውያን በተለያየ ሙያ ላይ የሚሳተፉ ኢትዮጵያውያን ተሰብስበው የመሰረቱት ማዕከል ነው። ይህንን የሚያደረጉበት ምክንያት ኢትዮጵያ ውስጥ ያለውን ድህነትና በጣም የተለያዩ ችግሮች ለመቅረፍ አብረን ተባብረን መስራት አለብን ከሚል የዜግነት ግዴታቸውን ለመወጣት ከማሰብ ያቋቋሙት ነው። በሁለተኛ ደረጃ ስፖንሰር ያደረገን ደግሞ የኢትዮጵያ ሚዲያ ካውንስል ነው። የኢትዮጵያ ሚዲያ ካውንስል እንዲሁ ከማንም ያልወገነ የሚዲያ ተቋማት በአንድነት የመሰረቱት ማህበራዊ ተቋም ሲሆን ከተመሰረተ እንግዲህ አሁን 4 ዓመት አልፎት ወደ 5ኛ ዓመቱ እየተጠጋ ነው ያለው። በአሁኑ ወቅት በሊቀመንበርነት ወይንም በሰብሳቢነት የሚመሩት የሪፖርተር ጋዜጣ መስራች የሆኑት አቶ አማረ አረጋዊ ሲሆኑ በምክትል ፕሬዝዳንትነት ወይንም በምክትልነት ደግሞ የሚያስተዳድሩት የሸገር FM መስራቾች ከሆኑት አንዷ የሆኑት ወይዘሮ መዓዛ ብሩ ናቸው። ባለፈው ሳምንት ስናስተዋውቅ ስህተት ሰርተን ነበረ። የሰላም ሚኒስቴር የቦርድ ውስጥ የካውንስሉ ቦርድ ውስጥ አለ ብዬ አስተዋውቄ ነበረ። በስህተት ነው። ከታላቅ ይቅርታ ጋር ያንን ማረም እፈልጋለሁኝ። ካውንስሉ የማንም ጣልቃ ገብነት የሌለው ራሱን በራሱ የሚያስተዳድር የመንግስት አካላትም በድርጅትም ይሁን በግለሰብ ደረጃ በቦርድ የሚያስተዳድሩት እንዳልሆነ መግለጽ ወዳለሁኝ ማለት ነው። እንግዲህ አሁን ለአማርኛ ተናጋሪ ተመልካቾቻችን በጣም ይቅርታ እየጠየኩኝ ወደ እንግሊዝኛ እንመለሳለን። ይሄንን ፕሮግራም ወደ በእንግሊዝኛ ማድረግ የኖረበት ደግሞ ምክንያት ከተለያዩ የዓለም ክፍሎች ያሉ በእኛ አሁን ባለው በተለይ የኢትዮጵያ ጉዳይ ላይ ከሌሎች ሀገሮች ተሞክሮ ማካፈል እና እነሱ የሰሩትን ስህተት እንዳንደግም ትምህርት እንዲሰጡን ብዙ የጋበዝናቸው እንግዶቻችን የእንግሊዝኛ ተናጋሪ ስለሆኑ በዛ እናደርጓለን፣ በእንግሊዝኛ እናደርጓለን። ከታላቅ ይቅርታ ጋር እንግዲህ አሁን ቋንቋ ልንቀይር ነው ማለት ነው። At the present time, PDCI is deeply concerned by the outbreak of violence and escalation of conflict in the Tigray region, as well as around the country, and the devastating impacts on civilian loss of life and the looming humanitarian crisis. PDCI has repeatedly called for and continues its call for an immediate ceasefire and dialogue to resolve differences. As part of its efforts, PDCI, together with the Ethiopian Media Council, brought to you this 4-part symposium on Ethiopian media for peace. Although this symposium concept was developed several months ago, it's extremely timely that we spend some time over the 4 weeks of the symposium drawing on global lessons and best practices and in addressing what we as media professionals and as media consumers can do to tackle these issues. The Symposum on Ethiopian Media for Peace has 4 objectives. Let me tell you what those 4 objectives are. The first one is increase awareness of issues, best practices, and challenges related to hate speech, disinformation, and peace building. The second objective is to empower participants to be agents of change for the dissemination of accurate information and peace building. The third objective is to increase awareness of measures that can be adopted to counteract and mitigate hate speech and disinformation and promote peace building. And the fourth objective of the symposium is to produce Ethiopian Media Declaration on countering hate speech and disinformation and promoting peace building. So I cannot think of a better relevant time to discuss this topic, this issue. And because we have been discussing this issue last week on the first session when we talked about the effect of hate speech and disinformation on inter-group conflict, we mentioned number of times, frequently, few terms. And these few terms are hate speech, misinformation, disinformation, fake news, malinformation. So I want us to be on the same page. So let me give you a definition, which you also find on the platform that you joined us on social. But let me give some definitions so that we all start off on similar pace. So let's start with hate speech. According to the United Nations, hate speech is defined as any kind of communication in speech, writing, or behavior that attacks or uses pejorative or discriminatory language with reference to a person or a group on the basis of who they are. In other words, based on their religion, ethnicity, nationality, race, color, descent, gender, or other identity factors. This is often rooted in and generates intolerance and hatred, and in certain contexts can be demeaning and divisive. That's hate speech. For the symposium, we're using the definitions of disinformation or fake news, misinformation, and malinformation coined by the United Nations Agency for Education, Science, and Culture, UNESCO. Disinformation or fake news is defined as information that is false and deliberately created to harm a person, social group, organization, or country. In contrast to misinformation, which is information that is false, but not with the intention of causing harm. And malinformation is information that is based on reality, used to inflict harm on a person, social group, organization, and country. So these are the definitions we're using, or keep these definitions in mind when we talk about fake news, disinformation, hate speech, and malinformation, misinformation. And you also can find this and the background of the symposium together with the objective on the events background section of the platform, which is social events. The symposium runs in 4 parts, as I said. Last week on our first session, the focus was on the effect of hate speech and disinformation on the intergroup conflict. You can find the video on Ethiopia PDCI YouTube channel. You can subscribe and you can share that link. You can find the entire more than 2 hours of video on the YouTube channel. But for the interest of people who did not join us last week, and also to give a little bit of a background and a summary, let me give you that recap within a few sentences. Last week, our first speaker was Professor Ephraim Yitzhak, founder and international chairman of the Board of Peace and Development Center. He expressed his shock, sadness, and concern about the current situation in Ethiopia. Professor Ephraim emphasized on the importance of joining our hands and our resources to fight poverty and not to fight each other. He urged and begged all of us, and particularly people in the media, to promote and plead for peace in the letter he read. Later on, we'll also share the peace pledge with you on the link, and I'll also read it at the end. The second speaker last week was the chairperson of the Ethiopian Media Council, Ato Amara Ragawi. Ato Amara explained the need to establish the Ethiopian Media Council, its code of conduct, and its structure, how they are fighting the spread of hate speech, fake news, and misinformation at the moment. He invited all concerned citizens and institutions to work with the Ethiopian Media Council to stand against hate speech and fake news, as well as to ensure freedom of expression and ethical journalism takes place. Our third guest, our guest of honor, was Her Excellency Wazaro Muferiat Kamil, Minister of Peace, but due to the current situation, she couldn't join us. So she represented, or her senior advisor represented her, and he was Dr. Abdi Zanaba, he apologized for Her Excellency's absence. Dr. Abdi shared the remark, which stressed the importance of media in the process of peace building and democracy. Peace is a process, and it can only be achieved in a social and political culture that supports listening, enjoys visualizing, and that is open to public scrutiny and dialogue, in which media plays a crucial role. He also reminded media professionals to remain creative and open-minded, and to engage with passion and to ask lots of questions. Well, we took a break with a music performance played by Munit Mesfin. She played a song, Fikr Farran, or We're Afraid of Love, which is a poem by the renowned poet laureate Tsaggai Gabramedhin. Then came our keynoter, Mr. Mark Thompson. Mr. Mark Thompson is former CEO of the New York Times and former Director General of the BBC. He gave a very informative and timely presentation on the systemic attempt to deny truth and lack of respect on truth in political language, particularly on hate speech, using examples and explaining specific terms. He also discussed remedies and what we can do as media and as individuals, and what governments can also do to stop hate speech. He explained steps of building narratives as DDVD, disinformation, division, victimization, and demonization. He also mentioned a paradox, authenticism, which is the false close of truth. He explained all this using two examples, one from hundreds of years ago and the other from the current situation of the post-election and post-election in the US. All right, so this is what happened last week. And now let me just give you some reminders. Make sure that you continue the discussion on the platform, and you can share it on social media by using the hashtag media for peace. And let's continue the conversation and the dialogue outside of this platform and throughout the week, throughout the month. All right, so without further ado, let me introduce the first guest, and we are extremely honored to have him here with us. As you know, Rwanda is extremely relevant and close to the hearts of many Ethiopians. In most cases, especially when we talk about the role of media in spreading hate speech and genocide, we use Rwanda as an example. Ethiopia has a lot to learn from Rwanda, so as to prevent the worst. Today, we're extremely honored by the presence of His Excellency, Mr. Johnston Busingye, Minister of the Ministry of Justice and Attorney General in the Cabinet of Rwanda. I'm sure it's extremely painful to talk about the ordeals of the darkest part of the life of Rwandese people, but it's also even more painful not to talk about it and not to give the lessons to the world. So Ethiopia can use a lot from the mistakes Rwanda has made, and we're here. His Excellency joined us to share the experience. Your Excellency, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you very much, moderator. I have a pendant for speaking names, Metasebia Shewaye Yirma. Thank you very, very much for moderation of this conversation. Excellencies, is he on? Ambassador Johnny Carlson, is he on? And Mr.
Yes. He's already joined us. He can listen.
Yes. Okay. So, Excellencies, permit me to express my gratitude and thanks for the invitation to this symposium on Ethiopian media for peace. It's a great honor for me to deliver these remarks, and thank you, Irma, for thinking that I could even be a keynote speaker or guest. But I will make a couple of points, try to be quick because I was told about the time I have. One, let us remember, ladies and gentlemen, that not all is well in Ethiopia today. When this conversation began some time ago, it wasn't as it is today in Ethiopia. Many Rwandans' hearts are always with their Ethiopian brothers and sisters. Let us also remember that unlike much of Africa, Ethiopia was not colonized and did not experience the near universal colonial policy of divide and rule. Colonial divide and rule was meant for the long haul because post-colonial trauma is still a challenge with many of the countries which were colonized. I reflected when I was growing up through school, Ethiopia was always every teacher's example for resistance to colonialism, resilience thereafter, and unity in diversity. I think every teacher in Africa would want to teach those things because they used to come at the very first, at the beginning of the lesson. Today, it also represents one of Africa's potential economic powerhouses. So our sincere wish for a quick return to peace to Ethiopia. But now I'm asked to focus on hate speech with a focus on my country, Rwanda, and the role the media played and so on. Rwanda has a colonial background. In 1946, the United Nations entrusted Rwanda to Belgium's safe custody together with Burundi. Many times I never understand what that means, how you entrust another country to another country's safe custody. We were here before colonialism came. The trusteeship was terminated in 1962 when when Rwanda attained independence. By that time, the Belgian colonial administration had crafted and implemented a severe divide and rule policy, which Rwanda suffered from intensely. The nation of Rwanda, now this is about Rwanda. The nation of Rwanda is composed of Rwandans. They speak the same language. They occupy the same Rwanda. They live together, the same hills and in the same communities. They share history. They share clans. They share totems. None of all the characteristics that differentiate people is present in Rwanda. And I make this comment advisedly because I'm trying to talk about the differences where they are natural and where they are artificial. No Rwandans or particular groups of Rwandans live in a particular part of Rwanda because of their tribal or ethnic or any other difference. We all live where we live. We've done that for thousands and thousands of years. There were three traditional economic activities engaged in by Rwandans during colonial times: crop husbandry, animal husbandry, especially cattle, and pottery. The population was differentiated on the basis of these activities as Hutu, crop husbandry, Tutsi, cattle husbandry, and Twa in pottery. These activities have now expanded, have mixed up. Everybody is doing everything. Nobody is still defined by this traditional activity. Colonial administration, in an act of colonial bigotry, found these differentiations fertile ground to sow divide and rule. So the differentiations were defined as ethnic differences. Nothing was further from the truth, but it was made the single story that described Rwanda for nearly 4 decades, and then it started to be accepted. Rwandans who, before the advent of colonialism, knew themselves as Rwandans, as one undivided and indivisible people, were educated scientifically. They imported scientists, philanthropists, doctors, and so on, who would convince people that they are different from the others. religiously, they also referred to the Bible to indicate how different we were, that we were different and had nothing in common. So the nation of Rwanda, the nation of Rwandans was dehumanized, robbed of their dignity, made tribal. So Rwandan recognition of equal humanity ceased to exist. The nation was maligned, and that began our descent to the hell that was the 1994 genocide against the Tutsi. A once united nation was dispossessed, split apart, and in many ways, before the 1994 genocide, Hutu killed Tutsi with ease. But those were pilot cases. In 1994, it was the real thing. 1 million Tutsi were killed in 100 days in broad daylight without any feeling of remorse, or that the victims were as human as their killers. And here comes hate speech. Hate speech was the multi-purpose vehicle that transported our country to the 1994 genocide. The artificial creation of 3 distinct ethnicities where there was none before, institutionalization of ethnicity, especially in the national political framework, discrimination against the Tutsi, were all made possible by hate speech. I have a few key chronological examples. I would have done a whole lot of a list, but I want you to listen to a few of these. After writing what he called a Hutu manifesto, Rwanda's first independence president, Gregory Kayibanda, described Hutu and Tutsi as 2 people with absolutely nothing in common, akin to 2 people from 2 planets. That was someone who had just become president, but before he became president, he also issued a document called the Hutu Manifesto. And by doing a Hutu Manifesto, he meant that the Hutu as a people are no longer part of the Rwandan people. They are now a Hutu as a people, and then there are Tutsi as a people and Twa as a people. Feudal era Rwanda was led by kings and chiefs who were Tutsi. Feudal rule was the case in very much of Africa and very much of Europe. But it's hate speech which turned it into Tutsi oppression and Tutsi domination. Because for you to have a justification for extermination, for discrimination, you had to have a victim of that. You have to set it up. So hate speech drove the feudal era kings and chiefs into Tutsi oppression and Tutsi domination. Mind you, not all feudal era chiefs, not all Tutsi were feudal era chiefs and kings. 99% of them were ordinary citizens existing side by side with everybody else in the country. But when hate speech turns this feudal category of our citizens into Tutsi oppressors and Tutsi dominators, then it was no longer necessary that you were a Tutsi down there in the countryside, taking care of your cattle, probably growing some crops. You were part of an oppressive and a dominant group. A political activist named Gitera in 1959 authored the now famous 10 Commandments of the Hutu, which we know in Rwanda as a major ignition of Hutu hatred against the Tutsi, they included prohibitions from trusting Tutsi, treating Tutsi as friends, and the like, all the way until Commandment 10. There were prohibitions meant to stir up hatred between the Hutu and the Tutsi. The Speaker of Parliament at the time, between 1960 and 65, spent longer than a month in Europe, traversing many countries, justifying the 1959 and 1960 killings and exodus of Rwandans Rwandans of the Tutsi now created ethnicity by describing how bad, how evil, how criminal they were, and how justified it was to kill them or throw them out of the country. Fast forward, a gentleman called Ngeze Hassan is now a convict from the International Court in Tanzania, which tried people who committed genocide here. He's now a convict, this Hassan Ngeze gentleman. In 1990, authored another 10 commandments of the Hutu in his newspaper called Kangura. If you Google, you will always find this newspaper called Kangura, and it will tell you who Ngeze was and what it was itself. Key among the commandments included one prohibiting a Hutu person from sympathizing with or empathizing with a Tutsi. That to do so is to betray a Hutu cause. Another gentleman, Mugesera Leon, is now a convict serving time here in Rwanda. He was a university lecturer in 1992, reignited the theory that the Tutsi belonged to Abyssinia. Abyssinia should be part of Ethiopia and should be sent back through the Nyabarongo River. Now, we have a river here called Nyabarongo, and this river is a tributary to the Kagera, and the Kagera is a tributary to the Nile. So this gentleman went somewhere deep in Western Rwanda, where he's born, and did a huge public rally, and mentioned a number of things, including that the Tutsi belong to Abyssinia, and they should be sent back to Abyssinia through the Nyabarongo River. After that, hundreds of Tutsi, hardly 2 weeks, were killed and thrown actually in the Nyabarongo River. Mugesera regretted publicly, that was another thing that he said at that meeting. He regretted publicly that we, and he used we, meaning we as a people, the Hutu people, we made a mistake in 1959-60 of not finishing the job. Finishing the job meant finishing Tutsi. And we meant him and the rest of his people who are Tutsi. Now, what is key here is that Mugesera in 1959 was 6 years old. So hate speech can be transgenerational. This gentleman was 6 years old. In 1992, he was a young man speaking to a huge rally. And here he is saying that in 1959, he's speaking about that in 1992. He says in 1959, when he was 2 years, we made a mistake of not finishing them all. Now, that tells you many things about hate speech. When it has its own capability of regeneration from one generation to the next generation, as long as it is meant to do the harm that it wants to do. Hate speech makes hatred a common group priority, higher than all other priorities. People normally, groups of people, communities always have priorities. They want to do something, they want to reach across the boundaries, they want to unite with each other, they want to do things together. But hate speech has this thread of making hatred a common group priority that is higher than all these other priorities. During the genocide, what we saw was that saving Tutsi or not participating in killing them was considered and accepted widely as betrayal. Questioning the legitimacy of the killing was also betrayal. Hate speech in that form results in the hatred that a mother or a father could kill their children because they had suddenly become enemies by blood. In Rwanda, parents of families with mixed parentage, Hutu or Tutsi, or in the end had very little choice but to kill their own children because they were either going to be Hutu or they were going to be Tutsi, depending on what was going on that day. So if it was a Tutsi father, he would be killed alongside with either some of the kids or all of the kids. If it was the Hutu mother, the same. If it was the Tutsi mother, the same thing would happen to her. In our world, hate speech is speech that eventually kills. And I want this to be, probably we should have a conversation around it in the end. In our world, hate speech is speech that we should understand that it eventually kills. Hate speech leads to nothing else. It cannot be confused with criticism, with opposition, with press freedom, with freedom of association. Hate speech is in its own category. In Rwanda, we know it, we experienced it. It's a cancer that kills. It is a cancer that won't be cured. Once it is started, it just won't be cured. We just need to prevent, we just need to stop it in its tracks, wherever it is. Media, the whole hate speech trail was carried by the media. A few newspapers, especially a newspaper called Kangura and just one radio, were able to set a whole country ablaze. And that Kangura and Airtelem, if you Google them, you will find them on Google, and you'll find the leaders, and you'll find what they did. But I've been questioning myself around this thing. In 1994, between 1959 and 1994, Rwandans had very few media outlets. Rwanda had, about 2-3 newspapers at most, and I think Radio Rwanda plus that Airtel radio. Until 1994, there was no media expansion and explosion like we see today. But ladies and gentlemen, if 1 or 2 media outlets could set a country ablaze, how much damage would the 1 million uncontrolled media outlets today that we see today, how much damage would they inflict on our people? How much damage would they inflict on a community if hate speech, if fake news, if just lies were allowed to simply go on air the way whoever wants to put them out there wants. Post 1994 Rwanda, our context, our press freedom context, we had to make a few choices. One, we could have open-ended press freedom. It happens in some of the Western countries. We could have responsible press freedom because of our history. Germany does that. We chose a mix of those two. Let's be open, but let's have responsible freedom of the press. And our media has expanded nearly 150% since 1994. Social media has expanded equally, absolutely uncensored. But Rwandans, media inclusive, have learned the lesson of history. That is my conviction until now. Irresponsible media propagated hate speech and killed 1 million people in 100 days. RTLM was allowed to remain on air, and people continued to die because of RTLM, because of media freedom concerns, not just in Rwanda, but across the globe, because everybody in the world was hearing and following RTLM. But because we have learned the lessons of history, I think we have had to have a mindset shift on the media and how we deal with the media and why we do so. So today, media and journalism are deployed to their fullest maximum capacity, but to cause rule of law, to cause accountability, to fight corruption, to do political party activity, to advocate unity, to advocate reconciliation because we've always tried to reconcile our communities since 1994, to fight poverty, to advocate integration, to criticize and oppose government where necessary. But hate speech, divisive speech, this speech that targets an ethnic community as an ethnic community or a religious community as such, there are limits to that kind of media. Media is in partnership with government, in partnership with the private, in partnership with faith-based organizations to do all things media, except hate speech, except divisive speech, except ethnic speech, the things that we died from, the things that killed us. So, ladies and gentlemen, moderator, permit me to stop there, and then I will be part of this until the end. I want to follow the conversation and then probably be part of the discussion at some point before it ends. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Your Excellency. We can't thank you enough, because we understand how painful that journey, and even remembering it and living through it when you are preparing for the speech, can be. And we really appreciate that. Most of the things His Excellency has said, we've been witnessing and observing here in Ethiopia, and there are some really concerning issues, and we'll come back with His Excellency with some questions and answers. But you know, one thing that really, I'm sure it will stick for a while, but what I got from his speech, if it is one sentence, it is: hate speech eventually kills. It's like an incurable cancer. It will kill. So we have to find ways to stop it. We have to find ways to prevent it before it's too late. And once again, thank you very much, Your Excellency. We'll come back. We'll have him here. Just get your questions ready. Post your questions on the platform, on social where you registered, and we'll collect the questions and we'll present it later. And we have students from Labawi Academy, I heard. So shout out to Labawi Academy, a very impressive high school that is nurturing African leaders. And they are here joining us, and I'm sure they will start throwing those questions that will make us think a lot. All right, so now let's go to our second speaker, who is Elias Meseret. Elias Meseret, most of us know him on social media as a fact checker. He has been doing that for a long time, probably over 2-3 years he's been doing it, and he's so popular to a point that even memes have been created. And one of the memes that I remember, actually, there is a domino, like that domino effect, and they started falling, and in between there is a hand, and that hand stopped from having the others fallen. And it says the dominoes are fake news and the hand is Elias Meseret. That's how prominent he is in the fact checking. He is an Associated Press correspondent in Ethiopia, and he's also the founder and Ethiopia's editor of Ethiopia Check, which is a part of the Africa Check, and it's an internews project. He also is a founding member and currently a president of Ethiopian Mass Media Professionals Association. And today he joins us to talk about fact-checking, fake news, and particularly in the case of Ethiopia. Due to connection problem, we cannot see his video, but we will hear his voice clearly. So without further ado, help me in welcoming Elias Meseret to tell us a little bit about fake news, disinformation, and what we can do to stop it as individuals and as media professionals. Welcome, Elias.
Thank you, Metasabe. I hope you can hear me.
Yes.
You can hear me, right?
Yes, we can hear you clear.
Thank you so much, Metasabia. Thank you for the introduction, and I'm really sorry that I am having a problem with my connection, so I'm not able to join you through video. You have made the introduction. Yes, I work for the Associated Press, and I'm also affiliated with the Ethiopian Mass Media Professionals Association, which we recently established here in Ethiopia. And I'm also a host to the Maraja with Elias radio program, which is dedicated to fact-checking. Last but not least, I'm the editor at Ethiopia Check, which is an internews project, a fact-checking desk, which was established 3 months ago here in Ethiopia with the support of internews. So just to introduce about my work very briefly, we have close to 50,000 followers on Facebook and also close to 35,000 followers on our Telegram channel, and growing number of followers, like 6,700 on Twitter. So what we do at Ethiopia Check is we do fact checking on a range of topics, and other we have started training journalists on fact checking. So far we have conducted one training, and also we are hoping to conduct the other one in December. And also from time to time we introduce different online tools which are available for the public to fact check items by themselves. As you all know, a growing number of people across the world get their information from social media. This is a social media age. And in our country, Ethiopia, according to Facebook, there are close to 7.5 million active Facebook users. And the internet penetration is around 15%, which is also growing very rapidly. But at the same time, it has become really difficult to know what is really and what's fake. As you know, in the digital era, information spreads fast. And using this opportunity, some actors are using this opportunity to spread misinformation and disinformation. I'm not going to delve into the definition of misinformation and disinformation because Metasabia has explained it at the beginning. So what we are now seeing here in Ethiopia is a rising tide of misinformation and disinformation. From my observation so far, mostly it is political in nature, and most fake news items that are being spread on social media are spread along ethnic lines and political divisions. As you know, Ethiopia is in a bit of a mess at the moment. There are a lot of things happening, and some political actors from behind are using this opportunity to come up with different fake news items that is really causing real damage to the country. As we all know, the other big problem is fake accounts are mushrooming. Fake accounts on Facebook and Twitter are being opened almost literally every day. So we at Ethiopia Check are trying to alert our followers by checking whether this is a real account or not. And it's really making a difference.
Unfortunately, Elias's connection
that fueled launching at the fake crowd. Hello, Metasabia?
Hello? Yes, your connection has been cutting off. We haven't heard the last few sentences you said.
Okay, I was speaking about the source of misinformation and disinformation from activists to the opposition camp, and also government institutions and government figures, and also individual users. I was also touching on the subject of the items which are being spread on social media, which are becoming pretty much sophisticated, well crafted, and well funded. So the problem with misinformation in Ethiopia is that there are not enough fact-checking institutions like in Kenya. For example, in Kenya, we have Pesa Check, Africa Check, and also other homegrown fact-checking institutions. But in Ethiopia, we don't have that. I know there are some initiatives with AFP Check and also Pesa Check, and now we have Ethiopia Check. But compared with the problem that we are having in Ethiopia, this is not enough. I mean, we cannot even think of addressing a fraction of the amount of misinformation that is out there on social media. For example, at Ethiopia Czech, there are only 3 people working here, and I know with the other, with PESA Czech and AFP Czech also, there are a few people. So I don't think that enough attention is given to fact-checking, which is, I think, the most effective way to tackle misinformation. And also, I have observed that media institutions here in Ethiopia are not doing enough. I know, for example, newspapers and television stations in Kenya and South Africa, they have some programs dedicated to fact-checking, in which they expose fake news, and also newspapers have some columns which are weekly dedicated to that, but you don't find that in Ethiopia. I know there is no incentive to do it, but the international community and non-governmental organizations should step in, just like our Internews did with Ethiopia Czech, so that with the incentive, more and more media outlets could engage in fact-checking. The other one, the big problem in Ethiopia at the moment is the lack of information, especially from government institutions. In the past, there used to be a government spokesman office, which was called the Government Communication Affairs Office, but at the moment, we don't have that one. As you know, there is the Press Secretary Office, which is only concerned about issues related to the Prime Minister Office and the First Lady's Office. So when journalists try to do stories and also for us to do fact-checking, we are not getting support. So it is really becoming difficult to get information. So if you don't have the relevant information on time, then doing fact-checking by itself is also difficult. So I know some journalists are calling for this government spokesman office to be established, and also we have also added our voice to that. The other and important problem that we have in Ethiopia is the threat that some fact checkers and also journalists are facing. As you know, fake news, there is somebody behind these items that are circulating on social media. So when somebody exposes this item, definitely the other actor is going to react. So recently, I have faced my own share of threats and also intimidation on social media because of my work on fact-checking and also my journalistic works. So when I speak to some journalists why they are not engaged in such activities, this is one of the other problems that they said. So in a country like Ethiopia, where the media literacy is very low, there is a tendency to believe whatever is written on social media is right. That's the truth for most people. As you know, in Ethiopia, Facebook amounts to internet. So people without fact-checking, without cross-checking their information, they share information which becomes repeated, becomes the truth. So what
I think Elias's network has been cut off because we can't hear him anymore. Elias, can you hear us?
We are witnessing at the moment is
unfortunately, we can't hear him anymore, but it was quite an interesting topic that he raised about fake news, about the challenge journalists face, and despite that challenge, how they are persevering into getting us to get us the truth and facts. But hopefully we'll see him, or we'll find him, we'll get connect with him in a bit. Yeah, during the question and answer, I'm sure he will have a better connection, and we'll bring all the questions, and also he can finish up what he started. He can just wrap it up. So Elias, thank you very much. That was Elias, EPI's correspondent in Ethiopia, and also the founder of Ethiopia Czech, and the one of the founding member and president of the Ethiopian Mass Media Professionals Association. So he was telling us about fact-checking, fake news, and the ordeals of the journalists go through to get us the truth. And it would have been nice to hear about how we could have prevented fake news and stop hate speech as individuals, but we'll get back to him. All right, so now let's go to, let's give you a little break. How about that? Because we have 2 speeches, and before we go to the third one, let's just take a break. Last week we had music, and this week we will have poetry. And today we are bringing you an amazing, fierce poet, Christine Johannes. She is a published poet. Her first poetry collection book was published in 2014. And it's entitled Missing Words. And she's working on her second book, A Little Birdie Told Me. She's the founder of Poetic Saturdays, a platform on Facebook that hosts poetry recital every month since April 2016. She's excited that it's going to be 5 years in few months. It's been a great creative and networking space for almost 5 years, and it has been active and useful, especially during this COVID-19 pandemic lockdown. So help me in welcoming the amazing Christine Johannes, because she prepared us special gift and poetry on peace for today. Good to have you, Christine.
Thank you so much for having me, Meti, and thank you for the lovely introduction. I don't have anything to add on top of what you've just said. I'm just really honored and very happy that I'm gonna be able to share a few words from, my soul. So without further ado, I'm gonna go on and start off with a poem in Amharic, and I'll top it off with the exact translation into English, and then I'll finish off with another poem in English. So here goes nothing. Semain ሰላም ብለው ጠሩት ትርጉሙን ስጠይቅ የለም የሰው ፍላጎቱ የልብም ስሜቱ ቢሉም የለም በዚህ ዓለም አንቺው ነሽ ያለሽን ብለው ዋሹኝ ካዱኝ ከነጀሉኝ ሰላም ነኝ ስላቸው በአይነ ቁራኛ አይተው አማለሉኝ ወንድምሽን እዩ ይኸው ሲያምር ብለው አሳመኑኝ ካንቺ እንጀራ ቆርጠሽ ለሱኮ ብትሰጪው ጥሩ ነው ማሉኝ ስለዚህ ራሴን አሳነስኩ ቆርጬ ሰጠሁኝ ሙሉነቴን በሉኝ ሰላም ነኝ አልኳቸው ባዶነቴን አይተው አላምንም ስላሉኝ ራሴን ለማጥፋት ከምድር መሰወር ፈልጌ ፈጣሪን ለመንኩኝ ፈጣሪውም ሰማኝ ጸሎቴም ሰመረ ከምድር ወደ ላይ ተነንኩኝ ወንድሜ የኔን ይዞ ከኔ ሁሉንም ገስቶ ማንበርከክ ፈለገ በወርቅ በብርቅርቅ በብልጭልጩና በማይጨበጠው ሁሉን አባለገ እኔም ከብናኙ በላይ ቆሜ አይቼ ሰዎችን ታዘብኩኝ ትዝብት ምን ዋጋ አለው ይው ወንድምሽን ብትመክሪው ምን አለ አሉኝ ጭራሽ ብለው ስጪው ተኪው ብለው እኔኑ በሱ እጅ የኔን እጅ ሊቆርጡ በፍጹም በሞቴ በሬሳዬ ዝናብ ፀሐይ ይመላለስብኝ ስትፈልጉ ወደ ሞቱ ውጡ ሞከርኩኝ ሰለቸኝ ታገልኩኝ አቃተኝ ፈለኩ አልቻልኩትም ጣርኩኝም ደከመኝ ስማልድ አደርኩኝ ሰላምን አትፈልጓትም ስለዚህ ሄጃለሁ በሰላም ጠብቁኝ እንዳለል የለሁም ግን ኑሩልኝ መጥቼ እስካያችሁ በጣም ጓጉቻለሁ ግን ምን አለበት ከልብ ብትፈልጉኝ እመጣ ነበር አይኔንም ሳላሻው ሮጬ ባቡር ተሳፍሬ መጥቼ ላቅፋችሁ እኔን አይደለም ግን የፈለጋችሁት ታናሽ ወንድሜን ነው እሱም ጦርነት ነው ስሙን ከረሳችሁ They named me Salam. Peace it meant, but it wasn't there. What people yearned for, what it symbolized, was nowhere. They said I was their hope. They lied to me through their teeth. I said that I was peace, but they distrusted me until I wasn't sweet. Look at your bro, they said. How good looking he is, and they made me believe. Give him a chance from yours, a piece of opportunity, allow him to achieve. So I made myself smaller, cut a piece of myself for him to grow bigger. And I yelled, I was peace, but it was an empty shell in their evil trigger. I decided right then I would be scarce enough, so I pleaded with God. And the gods, they listened to my prayers. They were real. I went into the cloud. My brother, taking what's mine, made everything kneel for him. With shiny, bright, and sparkling tales made porn into a film. So I stood from the ashes and watched the evil in mankind, but they said I was evil, unwilling to come down to save their kind. They dared put me at fault when they said to give way. Over my dead body, they will not have their say. I tried and I got bored. I fought and I got sold. You do not want me. I strived, you tired me. I prayed and you killed me. You don't want to be free. So I am gone. I've left. Wait for me in peace, though I am no longer there. Until I come to see you, I'm eager because you'll need me to be here. I would have come for sure, without a doubt, straight away to where you are. But it is not I you want. What you want is my bro, and his name is war. The last one. As I was sitting with a pen between my fingers and racing thoughts, as I was getting ready to write down this world's many plots, it occurred to me that some lived free from disturbance, when others don't even come close to such an abundance. In places where calm, quiet, and tranquility can only rhyme with futility, rarity, and vitality, where freedom from violence is only so extreme that even the thought of it makes it seem a dream, where bombs going off at every day's 9 o'clocks have become like the explosion of Disneyland's fireworks, lands where negotiations aren't made to sell sheep or cattle, but there is no other option because they must stop the battle. And from where I sit, a dispute never involved a gun. Worst case scenario, you'd throw a rock and run. But they're talking about negotiated peace through signatures of treaties as if we didn't have a piece of peace inside. It's an insult to all types of deities. Some have bottled up anger in their lust for power and created its release, and they're the same ones meeting to talk about restoring the peace. Ironic though, as if it could be stored and locked up somewhere, it is being thieved, stolen, and robbed from everywhere. But a portion of it still lies within each of our hearts. So don't tell me we want to fold our arms and not do our parts, that none of us want to tear war apart and piece together, because we owe it to the ones laying in pieces and scattered all over. Serenity now, if you've got ears that listen, here's a piece of my mind. They say no peace for the weary, but tell me, who doesn't deserve a peace of mind? I am sure you have your whole thoughts and you might want to share a peace, but do so now or forever hold your peace. Thank you.
Thank you, Christine. Thank you so much. You're just amazing.
You are. I'm honored.
Yeah.
To be here.
This is why we like art when we talk about peace, when we advocate peace, because art plays a very significant role, and also art expresses something that we cannot say in words, or it has that power. And thank you for bringing that to us. Thank you for pouring your soul.
Thank you,
Christine. All right.
Thank you so much.
Yes, so now let's go to our next speaker. And our next speaker, we're extremely honored that he joined us today. His Excellency Ambassador Johnny Carson, former U.S. Assistant Secretary for African Affairs and U.S. Ambassador in 3 African countries, that's Kenya, Zimbabwe, and Uganda. Ambassador Carson worked in foreign service for 37 years, and most of it was in sub-Saharan Africa. Ambassador Carson is the recipient of several superior honor awards from the Department of State and Meritorious Service Award from Secretary of State Madeleine Albright. The Centers for Disease Control presented Ambassador Carson its highest award, Champion of Prevention Award, for his leadership in directing the U.S. government's HIV and AIDS prevention efforts in Kenya. His Excellency Ambassador Johnny Carson has unmatched experience and wisdom to share with us, and we're extremely honored that he joined us today. Your Excellency, thank you very much for joining us today on this important symposium, which is Ethiopian Media for Peace.
Metasabia, can you hear me? Am I on now?
Yes, I can hear you. I can hear you, Your Excellency. Thank you for joining us. And now the screen is yours.
Thank you. Meta Sevilla, thank you very much for the kind introduction, and thank you very much for inviting me to be with you this morning. Before I begin, I also want to compliment the Honorable Minister of Justice and Attorney General from Rwanda, Minister Busingye, for his excellent remarks. He has given some very vivid and clear examples of the dangers of hate speech and how it can turn so disastrously bad for everyone. I'm sorry we didn't have a chance to hear all of Elias's comments, but I do look forward to hearing more from him as the program goes on. And Christine's remarks were poetry was quite nice. I want to preface my comments by saying that the views I share this morning represent my own thinking and not that of any organization with which I am affiliated. We are here this morning to discuss hate speech, disinformation, and the promotion of peace building. But I would like to frame my views in a broader and more current context. As someone who has always regarded Ethiopia as one of Africa's greatest and most important nations, I am deeply concerned, like all of you, about the current situation that exists in Tigray and across the country. I do not want to use this presentation to ascribe blame to one side or the other for starting and continuing the deeply unfortunate situation that currently prevails. The fighting over the past 2.5 weeks has been intense, and both sides have engaged in activities that have resulted in the tragic injury and death of hundreds of civilians, the damage and destruction of non-military targets, the dislocation and movement of tens of thousands of Ethiopians, and the disruption of food, water, and medical supplies to Ethiopian citizens, and the thousands of UNHCR-supported refugees from Eritrea who have sheltered in the Tigray region for many years. Internet and telephone services have also been disrupted, preventing information and communication from flowing into various parts of the country. All of these actions and events are deeply disturbing. But I don't want to simply look at where we are today, but instead I want to focus on what may happen in the weeks and the months ahead, and what I think should be done to avoid the worst possible outcome. The military conflict in Tigray cannot, and I stress cannot, be resolved militarily. The current conflict is spiraling out of control and threatens to undermine the progress that Ethiopia has achieved and can achieve in the future. The conflict also threatens the region. Even if the ENDF is able to subdue the uniformed armed forces of Tigray, the conflict will probably not end there. Given Ethiopia's long history, I suspect small groups of TPLF fighters and loyalists may engage in a violent, low-level, and persistent insurgency for months and years to come. The persistence of both regular and irregular armed conflict will only generate greater instability and uncertainty. And the longer the current fighting goes on, the more difficult it will be to heal the military, the political, and the societal wounds that have been open and festering. We should all have great concern for what might happen. Ethiopia is a great, great country with a great history, but it is also a very fragile country. That fragility is reflected in the divisions between its ethnic and linguistic communities, the tensions sometimes between its various religious groups and between the regional governments and the federal government. It's also reflected in the social and economic conditions of some of its people. The continuation of the current hostilities increases the country's fragility, makes it more vulnerable. It will derail and set back the country's historic political and democratic process. The fragility and this conflict will undermine the confidence in government institutions and in regional and national political leaders. The current conflict will generate and exacerbate friction between different ethnic groups, sometimes pitting neighbor against neighbor, community against community, and state against state. Ethiopia's rapid and much praised economic growth over the last decade will come to a stop and begin to unravel. Investors who were once interested in setting up shop and businesses will delay their plans or simply go elsewhere. Wars are expensive, and national debt and poverty occur with them. And the country's image as a business and commercial hub and destination will be seriously damaged. With a population of over 110 million people and growing rapidly, Ethiopia cannot afford an economic slowdown or economic stagnation. It needs a thriving, vibrant, growing economy and a peaceful society. The dislocation of peoples inside the country and the movement of people across international borders will almost certainly generate a new humanitarian crisis and generate the need for greater international assistance, recreating in the minds of many and on the ground a situation not unlike what Ethiopia faced several decades ago. Ethiopia does not need more conflict. Ethiopia does not need more war. Ethiopia does not have to go down this dismal dead-end trail. There is a way to avoid this, and there is still time to do it. Both sides to this conflict need to agree quickly to a ceasefire and an immediate cessation of hostilities. The government needs to grant humanitarian access and respect international humanitarian and human rights protocols. They should agree to resolve the conflict through political means. Both sides need to resolve the conflict through political means. They should agree to a framework for political discussions and serious and sustained negotiations and dialogue. To build confidence, both sides should agree to some measures that demonstrate serious commitment. The federal government should release political prisoners and reinstate Tigray officials who have been fired from government jobs. And those on the other side should also reaffirm their commitment to a united, peaceful, and democratic Ethiopia. The federal government should set in motion an inclusive political dialogue and recommit to holding transparent and credible national elections at a clearly designated time. And the government should take immediate steps to stop hate speech and intercommunal violence. The other side should do the same. I know there is a special concern in this morning's audience about hate speech, and there should be. In fragile, conflict-torn regions and countries, hate speech that demonizes, that stigmatizes other communities based on ethnicity, based on religion, and based on where they are, can easily lead to harassment, intimidation, killings, mass murder, and even genocide. We heard clearly from the Minister of Justice this morning what the power of a word and a message carried over radio or by the newspaper can do. And once set in motion, it is difficult to control. In Ethiopia, we already see the first stages of hate speech being deployed in the media and being actualized in the demonization of groups, the dismissal and arrest of certain citizens from different ethnic communities, and the killing of others. Hate speech should not be allowed to turn a civil, peaceful society into a cruel and callous one. Given the rise of social media and the global community in which we all live, addressing hate speech is not just a local issue, it is also an international issue as well. In stopping hate speech, both the communities on the ground as well as the international communities have a responsibility. In stopping hate speech, it is extremely important to hold those who engage in hate speech responsible for their actions. And hate speech should never be confused with free speech. Identify those organizations, digital platforms, media companies, and political parties that are engaged in hate speech and report them to both local and international authorities and organizations. Some of that hate speech is generated locally, but carried internationally. There's both an international and a local component to stopping it. Strongly encourage government officials to act against perpetrators of hate speech, including closing down media houses and digital platforms that actively engage in hate speech. Government officials should also report hate speech to international social and media platforms and encourage them not to further disseminate it. There should be given strong support for local organizations, like the one that Elias talked about that he runs, and like the ones he mentioned in Kenya and South Africa and others around the world. Support local organizations that track and report hate speech, that track and report disinformation, and make it known to authorities that it is seen and that it is disruptive and it is damaging to society and the peaceful elements of society. It is important also, and very important, to work with religious groups, traditional leaders, and community-based organizations to promote tolerance and mutual respect. And I emphasize to promote tolerance and mutual respect, and to speak out very clearly against discrimination, stigmatization, victimization, and the other elements of hate speech. If it is not stopped early, it can metastasize and move very rapidly through local means of communication as well as through social media, which is digitally mobilized internationally. And foreign governments and embassies should be encouraged to take action against groups and governments that engage in hate speech, calling them out and pointing them out when they are engaged in it. They should not be silent witnesses to hate speech that can lead to harassment, victimization, killings, mass murder, and even genocide. The dangers of hate speech and the words that are a part of them can tear the fabric of a society apart. Strong societies as well as fragile societies. These are just a few of the things that I think should and can be done. But the most important thing today for Ethiopia is to silence the guns, and begin to restore the peace the country requires for building its economy, creating opportunities for its people, fighting the COVID-19 pandemic, and helping Ethiopia realize its greatest days are still ahead, and many of its dreams are yet to be fulfilled. Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador. Thank you very much for your concern about the current case of Ethiopia, and also for emphasizing what hate speech can do to a community and to a country. And yes, you're right. The issues related to hate speech are not just the issue of Ethiopia. They are the issue of the region and the issue of it's an international issue. And thank you for being here with us. And I'm sure you'll stay with us to take some questions. So now, we are going to have Elias. He is going to come back to finish up what he started earlier about fake news, disinformation, and checking facts. And by the way, please keep on posting on Facebook, keep on tweeting, and make sure that you use hashtag peace, media for peace, hashtag media for peace. In that case, we all can join in that conversation, and we will have more people give out their ideas and join us in this important dialogue, which is Ethiopian Media for Peace. We're getting questions. Make sure that you get engaged in the discussion wall of our application, whether you are on the app or on the web. On the website, you can still get engaged in the discussion wall. And I am collecting few questions, and I'm also getting some comments, which I am actually happy to see, because I can see that you're all concerned, and I can see that you all are engaged, and keep them coming. Okay, I will bring all the questions later on, and our panelists are going to answer some of your questions. So Lidet Befekadu said, excellent discussion. Thank you very much, PDCI and Ethiopian Media Council. It's the both of them that brought you the symposium here. So we will have time for question and answer, and hopefully we'll have Elias Meseret joining us this time. So yes, now let's go on to the next session. Yeah. Hi, Elias. Welcome back. Hello, Elias. Can you hear me? Hello. Elias? አልሰማሁህም።
በጣም ያስተጋባል ድምፁ።
አሁን ጥሩ ይመስላል። እስቲ ቀጥል እስቲ ኤልያስ። I think we can hear you now.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you now.
Matasada, can you hear me now?
Yes, I can hear you. I can hear you now. You can go on.
I'm sorry that the connection is really making my presentation really look bad. But I was last mentioning about the very low media literacy here in Ethiopia and the tendency to believe whatever is written on social media is the truth, which is causing a lot of problems. So we at Ethiopia Check are trying our best to inform readers that shouldn't be the case. We are introducing online tools which are available for free for the public to use. So we are constantly reminding people about the dangers of social media misuse. As such, we are getting a lot of positive feedback. But as I mentioned earlier, there is also a law which was enacted by Ethiopia, the Disinformation and Hate Speech Law. I was mentioning earlier that personally I support the presence of this law because it has some deterrent effect. But at the same time, I don't think that the law by itself will solve the problem that we are having here in Ethiopia. There is even a concern that the government may use this law to target dissenting voices. So utmost care should be taken so that this law is not going to be used to target some people. And I also want to mention here, on social media, there are some people who are considered to be untouchable. I know there are several activists in the form of propagating different ideas on social media, and also government officials, and also those in the opposition. Especially nowadays, they are spreading misinformation without any care. But when the people are trying to respond to them, when people try to fact check them, they are going against journalists. As you know, just in the past few weeks, around 6 journalists were arrested, and there is that constant threat of doing fact checking and also practicing journalism here in Ethiopia, which unfortunately appears to be sliding back to the previous time and causing some problems. And I just want to add that state media outlets like EBC, FANA, Walter, they have hundreds of journalists operating with them. But it really amazes me why they are not engaged in fact-checking. So there are some organizations like Ethiopia Check who have just 3 individuals who dedicated themselves to fact-checking, but there are institutions who have the capacity and also the knowledge on how to fact-check, but they are not engaging on such activities. So we are also constantly calling upon other media outlets to join our initiative. Otherwise, the problems that we are seeing now, the problems that are being cited, that were cited by Ambassador Johnny Carson and also His Excellency the Minister from Rwanda, otherwise it's just waiting things to happen. Already we are seeing quite a lot of problems in our country. Otherwise, we should start tackling the problems, and we should start the conversation around misinformation, disinformation, and hate speech. This is a point that I want to add, but if there are any questions later on, they are welcome. I'll try to respond. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Elias. Yes, I'm glad you're back, and you gave us some more information and some more insight on the works that you do. Yes, it's very critical that every institution, every media institution should do fact-checking, and that's what we're missing on different media outlets, and that's very important that we need to emphasize on that. We need to work on that. One of the things one of the sponsors here, the Ethiopian Media Council, is trying to do is to build capacity of media institutions and media professionals, and I think together with Ethiopia Check and the Ethiopian Mass Media professional association. This is some challenge. This is one of the challenges that we need to tackle together. So thank you very much. Now let's have the Q&A session. Let's bring back all our speakers today, and they will join us to answer the questions. I got some questions from you, and keep texting, keep sending those questions on the discussion wall, keep the conversation going, and on social media, make sure that you use hashtag media for peace. Okay, so yes, now let's start our Q&A. Let's have all four guests, and that is His Excellency Mr. Johnston Busingie, Elias Meseret, and His Excellency Ambassador Carson. Thank you once again for joining us. And we have some questions that came from our participants, and I am going to forward that to you. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Yerma. Thank you.
Good. Okay, so the first question that came to us is, Samara Kasai. Samara has forwarded his question saying, is it possible to stop hate speech and eradicate a misleading information by enacting prohibitive laws? Isn't the solution more of a social intervention than a legislative one? I think Your Excellency can respond to this, because the Rwandan case, you mentioned it earlier, but it will also give you a chance to stress on strong laws and what to say, what not to say, without compromising the freedom of expression.
Thank you very much, Yerma. It's probably not possible to prohibit hate speech by legislation, by strong laws, or by punishment, or if those ones need to come in, they should come in as a complement. But one important thing we need to understand is that hate speech doesn't come from the blue and doesn't end in the blue. It comes from a certain quarter, it comes from a certain position, it comes from a certain thinking, and it leads to a certain destination. Obviously, hate speech will always lead to a disastrous destination. So once a people understand that, unfortunately for Rwanda, we understood it the hard way. We paid the ultimate price. We lost 1 million people in 100 days. We were not able to see that and prevent it, and not allow ourselves to descend into 1994 genocide against the Tutsi. So the most important thing in my view is that a people should learn the lessons of history, should learn comparative knowledge. If it didn't happen in your country, but it happened in my country, then you probably have a very good basis to say, once bitten, twice shy. You probably have a good reason. So we need a social conversation about this. We need to understand the price to pay for allowing ourselves to descend that direction. The second point is that hate speech begets more hate speech. So if it starts and you think it's just hate speech, it will end tomorrow, but you haven't done anything to end it. It will beget more, and it will beget more. And in the current environment, where you have multiple media outlets, uncontrolled social media, as I said earlier, in 1994, these things were not there. We had one radio, we had probably no television station, we had probably one or two newspapers. Today, you have millions more than that. So that is an environment which multiplies hate speech. So laws are very important. In the end, people should be held accountable. People should be responsible for the actions they take. Hate speech should be a crime like any other crime in a penal code. If murder is a crime, if robbery is a crime, if theft is a crime, hate speech should be added to our penal code. But the medicine for hate speech, if you wait for it to be the penal code, to be processing in courts and so on, you might be a trip or two late. So we need to understand the price to pay and the consequences. Now, the other thing, the last point I want to make is that hate speech is deliberate. It's intentional. And it's not confused with press freedom. It's not confused with free speech. It's not confused with opposition. It's not criticism. No, hate speech is hate speech. You do it, you calculate that you will dehumanize, you will malign, you will lessen the value of the other in terms of yourself. And that was in Rwanda a multitude of places, and it caused the tragedy, the genocide of 1994 against the Tutsi. So I accept you don't use tough laws and taking people to courts and prisons is a good thing. In the end, people need to be held accountable. However, my lesson in Rwanda, our lesson in Rwanda was we learned it by paying a very big price. And after that, our people have learned the lessons of history, and we don't have journalists in jails serving for hate speech. We don't have them because they themselves are part of the Rwandan society. They are part of our community. They know what hurts. They know what doesn't hurt. And there is a lot of news anyway out there. You can criticize, you can oppose, you can do political activism, you can use your press freedom to do everything you want. But you should know that hate speech, who knows whether it won't, the victim won't be your friend, your parent, your sister, your brother, or something else. So we have learned the lessons of history, unfortunately learned them the hard way. But this is not something that the world should continue learning the hard way. Our lessons should be one too many. That should be like, enough is enough. Then legislation, civil society, faith-based organizations, private sector, all these people who sponsor news and so on, including the global giants, the Facebooks and the Twitters and so on, everybody needs to understand that hate speech simply goes against the business. It simply goes against humanity. It simply goes to kill people. So while I agree that laws should be used and people should be held accountable, I agree with Samara that what we need is a social conversation around where are we headed? What is the benefit do we get from hate speech? Absolutely nothing. Absolutely none. It's only negative. So why would you pursue a business that is going to give you a disastrous consequence?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Your Excellency. In relation to this, there is another question that came, and I would like to forward this to Ambassador Carson, because this is what we've been facing recently. So what do we do when the people who are spreading fake news are in high position, and how can we keep them accountable?
Thank you, Mesa. That's a very good question. I think that it has to be done in multiple ways. I think that when individuals, wherever they are, in high positions or people on the street or in the media, are engaging in fake news, hate speech, disinformation, this should be exposed by publicizing what in fact are the facts and the truth. The misinformation, the disinformation should be exposed publicly to the greatest extent possible in a free and democratic society. If a senior person is engaged in deliberately disseminating misinformation and fake news, it should in fact be called out. And it needs to be called out by community leaders, organizations that are set up to counter fake news, and by all the other responsible groups in societies, law societies, community groups, wherever it can be done, it should be done. And officials should be informed that the information that they're passing out is incorrect and wrong. Hopefully, if this is being done on a grand scale, that international organizations will also step in and point out that the information being released by certain individuals, certain groups, certain organizations is also wrong and should be countered by factual information.
Thank you so much, Your Excellency. Thank you. So that was a question forwarded by Aidan Atakulti. Thank you, Aidan, for bringing this important question. Next question goes to Elias. Aklilu Tesfaye asked, how do we control those who use social media as a means of income? And we've seen people trying to fetch more likes, more shares, so that they can get paid by the social media platforms their own. So how can we encourage them to avoid fake news or misinformation? But how can we do it when it's their income source?
Thank you, Dr. Actually, according to my observation, most pages on Facebook and also Twitter accounts and also on YouTube, most pages are spreading misinformation and disinformation as a means of getting a lot of attention to their page. So, as you know, the truth spreads slower than the fake news. I mean, fake news spreads really, really faster. And even we have noticed that when we try to debunk fake news, it gets a small amount of traction as compared to the fake news, because by nature, as you know, false information is mixed with a lot of uncorroborated claims and very eye-catching and mouth-watering claims that are involved in fake news. So it is a means of attracting a lot of attention. So when you go to Telegram, there are some pages who have like hundreds of thousands of followers, but when you get into the page, it is full of fake news because they got all those followers because they were spreading for false information. The same with Facebook. So I think social media companies like Facebook should step in and act. Recently, there was an initiative by some concerned citizens who wrote a letter to Facebook to do more, to do its part, because its platform is really being abused in countries like Ethiopia, where people are being exposed to misinformation, which is causing not only the displacement of people, but also in some instances the loss of life. So I know that Ethiopia's new law has some prescriptions which puts liability on social media companies, but I know that's not being implemented up until now. But it should be stressed that social media companies shouldn't just sit and watch their platform being abused just because some people really wanted to have more followers and some people want to make money out of it. It shouldn't mean that it doesn't translate into the spread of misinformation, which is causing a lot of problems. So yes, definitely false information is being used as a means of getting attention for a lot of people who are making a living out of a living, especially on YouTube. So at the same time, I think it is the role of the government, as His Excellency the Minister said, there should be some limits when it comes to spread of hate speech and disinformation. So also the role of the government in maintaining law and order is very important, and also social media companies like Facebook should hire people, especially Ethiopians in the case of Ethiopia, who know the local dynamics, the local language, and also the local politics, should monitor content and report to it, and should act upon accordingly. Otherwise, at the moment we are seeing very minimal engagement also, for example, Facebook, because I'm constantly mentioning about Facebook because it is the biggest, most people use social media in Ethiopia. When you talk about social media, it is Facebook. Twitter has close to 900,000 followers, so Facebook should do more. I know they have recently hired some people, but they should also hire people who speak Tigrinya, Afan Oromo, and also Somali language in addition to the Amharic language. So their responsibility should also come here. Thank you.
Thank you. One more question, Elias, for you. And after that, I'll give 1 minute for each of my panelists to give closing remarks. But Maaza Hadera has asked, who are journalists responsible for, the society or the government? That's for you, Elias.
Please, Metasavia.
Who are journalists responsible for the society or the government?
Metasavia, journalists are only responsible for the truth. When journalists do their reports, the only guiding principle that they should follow is balancing their reports and also sticking to the truth, not for the government or to opposition or to other bodies. In recent weeks, we have seen some media reporters which are attracting a lot of attention, both from at home here in Ethiopia and also from abroad. There are some concerns on some of the reporters. Obviously, these are times when there are a lot of emotions involved because of what's happening in our country. But we are seeing that some reporters are being published, which are not balanced, which are siding with only one of the bodies involved in this conflict. But that should be the case. Professional journalists only stick to the truth, and the only guiding principle, again, I want to say that it is the truth. So as long as they balance their stories, as long as they have all the parties involved and have a say in their stories, then that's the role of journalists. Otherwise, it shouldn't be the government. But obviously, from practice, what we are seeing is that government-owned media outlets have the obvious tendency to side with the government and to come up with a lot of propaganda that is being distributed by the government. And those in the opposition camp, they only have opinions. They have guests who are lashing out at the government and stuff. So in a moment like this, it is expected, but what we are seeing at the moment is really worrying. Professional journalism is really under attack.
Yes. Thank you so much, Elias and my panelists. So I will give you each 1 minute to give your closing remarks. So I will start with Your Excellency Ambassador Johnny Carson. You have 1 minute to do your closing remark, and after that I will go to Elias Meseret, and last but definitely not least, Your Excellency Mr. Johnson Busengie. You will give us a 1 minute closing remark. So Your Excellency Ambassador Johnny Carson, back to you. Okay. I think Ambassador, his screen is off. Okay, so Elias, you're here. So give us a 1 minute remark, a closing remark before we wind it up.
Thank you, Metasavia. I just want to stress on one point. Everything that you see on social media is not true. I mean, this should be a guiding principle for all of us. We are having this whole lot of problems because of disinformation and hate speech, because the media literacy, as I mentioned earlier, is low, and people tend to believe whatever is written on Facebook or Twitter is the truth. So if people are aware that there are some actors who have done some agenda of their own and are posting some information, so if this thing is really understood by the wider public, then we will have less problem. So people should take note of this, and also I really call upon media outlets in Ethiopia to join the effort to combat misinformation, especially the ones that have the capacity. As I mentioned, the state media outlets, they have the reach, the responsibility, and also the knowledge. So I call upon them to join Ethiopia Check in our endeavor to fight misinformation. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Elias. We really appreciate your time and your insight. And I know you're doing a great job, so keep on doing it. Keep on informing us with some truth and facts. All right, I don't see my other panelists, so I think I'll have to wind it up here. I don't see His Excellency Mr. John Symposym as well, so let me just go on and read the peace pledge before I wind it up, because
I'm seeing here.
Yes, you're back. Good.
Yeah, I'm back.
Oh, please. So you have 1 minute to give us your
Thank
closing.
you. Thank you, Irma. First of all, let me thank you and thank my colleagues in the panel for excellent conversation, although we are doing it in hard times with regard to Ethiopia. Hate speech is, it works for no one. It only works for those who want to dehumanize and eventually destroy others. That's the only group of people for whom hate speech works. So we should avoid hate speech. It doesn't work for anybody. It doesn't do it. It's not good business. Second point I want to make is that Rwanda, our experience should be one too many for any country on our continent. We should not engage in hate speech as a matter of, it's not a joke. It's not something you play with so that in the end it gives you 1 or 2 advantages. It just doesn't. We lost 1 million people in 100 days in broad daylight, and everybody was killing without remorse because for 40 years, for 30 years, for 20 years, for 10 years, people had been made to understand that the other part that they were killing had no value, had no equal value. So the value of equal humanity had gone. So let's not go that direction. So no country should allow itself to descend the road Rwanda descended. We believe that our experience that we went through should be enough for every brother or sister on the African continent. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Your Excellency. Yes, we should all learn from Rwanda. That is not a mistake any country should repeat. So thank you very much for your time and for honoring us with your experience, with your insight, because it's very critical for Ethiopia and Ethiopians right now. So I really appreciate it. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Irma.
Okay, so now before we wind up, let me read the pledge by PDCI, because you will find it also on the website, and here you'll find the link. We'll share it on the screen, but PDCI asks everyone to take this pledge to work together for one peaceful Ethiopia, and your commitment affirmed was your signature. So let me read this pledge. The one that I'm reading is in English, but you'll find the Amharic, the Tigrinya, the Afan Oromo, and the Arabic versions on the website. Acknowledging the foundational role that peace plays for Ethiopia's unity, development, and human rights and dignity of every citizen, reaffirming the unwavering belief that peace can be built, violence can be rejected, and understanding and respect amongst the Ethiopian people can be created despite differing views, cultures, faiths, and traditions. Recognizing the essential role that I, as an individual and as a member of my family, community, and nation, can play to bring about peace and promote and encourage respect for human rights and fundamental freedoms for all Ethiopians, irrespective of ethnicity, culture, language, or religion. Reaffirming that lasting peace will require working together through cooperation with all the people political organizations, faith-based organizations, civil society, and others, I, individually or working with others, pledge to 1. Not attack, defame, or speak evil of any Ethiopian because of her or his ethnic or religious background, but to the best of my ability, respect and love them, work for peace among them, and work for their health, education, and economic welfare. 2. Strive for the protection and visualization of human rights and fundamental freedoms of all Ethiopians, irrespective of their ethnicity, culture, language, or religion. 3. Seek and learn the United Nations Universal Declaration of Human Rights to understand the civil, political, economic, social, and cultural rights afforded so I can exercise knowledgeably my duties as promoter and champion of peace. 4. Promote peace through nonviolence as a principle and practice by choosing carefully my words, actions, and thoughts, communicating positively and listening to others, especially those with whom I disagree with, forgive others, and making amends with hurting others. 5. Speak up for peace at every opportunity and through every means, for example, social media, and not to remain silent when I see or hear of things that disturb the peace and lead to suffering. 6. Invest in children and young people, for example, in schools, teaching the value of tolerance, mutual respect, and nonviolence to build a fair and inclusive Ethiopia that embraces diversity. 7. Discuss, train, or disseminate information about tolerance, friendly relations, and peace principles, ideas, and strategies to draw public attention and advocate for their acceptance. 8. Learn and understand, advocate, and apply effective remedies allowable by law in the event of violation of people's rights, including calling for prompt and impartial investigations. 9. Not participate by acting or by failure to act in violations of human rights and fundamental freedoms, and act courageously to reject violence and discrimination whenever encountered and stand with those that are treated unfairly. And 10. Work with the development of local, regional, and national peace clubs and promote alliances with Ethiopian and international peace organizations. This is the peace pledge, and you can find it on PDCI website, and we share on this platform. You can find it in Amharic, Oromifa, Tigrinya, and Arabic. Last but not least, to all our participants, to those who are attending now, what would be your commitment, if any, to eradicate information that leads to conflict? This is the question from us to you. You can comment it, you can continue the discussion. Next week, ladies and gentlemen, we will come with a title, Cyber Hate and the Role of Social Media. But until then, continue the discussion and make sure that you share this information across your social media and within your networks, within your circle of influence. It has been a great honor to be your moderator today and throughout the symposium on Ethiopian Media for Peace. And once again, thank you, PDCI and the Ethiopian Media Council, for bringing the symposium. This virtual event is organized by Flawless Events. And I hope we all stand for peace. All right, I'll see you next week. Until then, stay in peace.